Hi, I'm Jackie from Travelling Thread Co. We're so excited you've chosen our kits. Come on, let's get creative. You'll need your machine's zipper foot to stitch in the zip. You'll also need a ruler to mark your quilting lines, and you'll need something to turn your corners through. I'm using a knitting needle. It's got a nice blunt but pointed end. Let's get sewing. First step in preparing our sleeve ready for quilting is to mark our quilting lines. We'll need to be doing this on all three of the main fabric pieces. Rule a nice straight line down the center. Do this to each piece. What we'll then be doing, because it's not an even number, an even spread across, but we still want nice even quilting lines, we're going to take from the middle line that we've drawn. I'm going to place the 8 centimeter mark on my middle line, and then I'm going to go in 2 center increments up to 14 and 2 center increments back to 2. That allows that 1 centimeter for seam allowance on each edge, and it gives us a nice even spread of lines. Do this to all 3 pieces, and then we'll continue. Once you have marked all of your lines on your main pieces of fabric and they're nice and even, you need to get your quilt batting, and we want to place right sides up our outer pieces on top, nice and evenly, of each of the quilting pieces. Once we have those placed, this includes the pocket, we want to pin on the lines, and it means we'll get like a nice even stitch line because it can tend to shift. When you've done that to all of your pieces, what you're wanting to do is set your machine to a straight stitch and hop on over. I've got my machine threaded with the coordinating thread that came with the kit. I'm going to place my presser foot down just inside that top edge on my first row of stitching. I can remove my pin at this point, and there's no need with quilting to backstitch because the edges will be beautifully caught within the project, so these stitches will hold nicely. We're only going top to bottom, no backstitching on every single line that we've ruled. Once you've done all of your quilting lines, you're wanting to trim down the batting, not the main fabric, just any of the batting that's just lightly over the edge there. And you want to do this to each piece and give them a nice press and pop back to your machine. Okay, we're ready to do a little bit of pressing before we move on. So I've got my pressing mat and my nice little teeny iron here. With this one, we want to press it in the center so that we have a beautiful center line. Then I'm going to fold each of the sides into that center line. Press. And press. So we had our center fold and each of the sides in towards that center fold. The next step's really simple. We're going to fold it across on itself, and it encloses all of those raw edges. One more press. And then on our machine, we are going to stitch from top to bottom, reversing at both ends. I'm using my hand wheel to start off, and I'm about a stitch or 2 down because that raw edge is going to be nicely caught in our seam allowance. I can pull my 2 threads just lightly out the back as I start my stitch. All the way to the bottom. Nice little reverse. And that beautiful stitch along the edge there, enclosing all of it. With our long piece that came with the kit, we're wanting our wrong sides together and to press it down the center, making that same center mark similar to what we just did with the tab. Down the center, opening it up, and once again across, press to that middle line. We'll do that for both sides. That way, when we fold it across, we are going to be able to thread it beautifully and it will fit really nicely in that D-ring. Okay, once you've done that and folded it across, you can thread that D-ring on. I've just clipped down the edges to hold that nicely. Remember, we've got our right sides together, sewing at 1 centimetre and reversing at the top and bottom. Now that's beautifully held together. We can finger press that open so that we don't get rid of our other press marks, and then where we've got those beautiful press lines, it will fold back over onto itself. Beautiful. Now we've got this also attached. The next step is to find where that line is that you've just sewn them both together. Remember, those are pressed open on the inside. Make sure that line matches up beautifully and that your edges also match nice and evenly. We're actually going to want to put a little clasp on that bit for now. This will keep shuffling as we sew. We're going to now stitch down along that beautiful folded side, and I've made sure that I've got these ones really nicely matched. I've got my needle going just in from the edge. I'm using a bit of an invisible line on my presser foot. You could even stick some washi tape to help you, and it will help guide you. You could stick a piece there and follow along the side. Just anything that is helpful for you to keep a nice straight line. Let's sew. Reverse at the start and finish. You're able to just slide this as you come to it and continue to slide it away from yourself as you sew. Now that we've gone around that side, we're going to do exactly the same across this other side. Now we've sewn around the edge of both sides and we've got our beautiful clasp on there. Find where your matching seam was. Move your clasp down to that part, and we're going to leave not too much. We want it sort of, you'll find it sort of sits naturally 1 to 2 centimeters away from your D-ring, just so that it's nice and easy to sew and that it doesn't get caught in under your foot. So once you've got that, you're going to actually use this as your guide of your stitch line, and you're going to sew with just 1 or 2 back stitches all the way down and back stitch at the other end. Let's attach our Velcro. You'll need the lining piece of your front pocket. The first step, we're going to figure out which is our softer piece of the Velcro and which is our rougher piece of the Velcro. The rough piece we need to set aside because that will be sewn onto the main front piece.
The softer piece is the one that we want to sew onto the pocket lining. My first step is to find the center. I'm going to just finger press that so I have my little center mark. And from there, I'm going to measure 2 centimeters down, and I'm going to draw a 1 inch line directly in the center at that 2 centimeter mark. That is going to be the position for the top of my Velcro. We'll pin this into place and then we'll go and sew. I'm at my machine and you can see that I've just pinned across to hold that Velcro into place. I have my straight stitch setting and I'm going to lower my needle into that very top corner of the Velcro, and basically I'm going to pivot right along, like just inside from the edge at each point until I get back around to my starting point. I lower my presser foot and position it to lower the needle into that top corner. Then I'm going to take out my pin and I'm going to just make my way slowly down to that bottom edge, and I'm just going to use my hand wheel to keep it nice and neat. Reverse. And we have our Velcro neatly stitched on. At our machine, we're going to get our right side of our outer main pocket fabric, and we're going to place it right sides down onto our lining piece, and we are just going to stitch along the top using a 1 centimeter allowance. Okay, that's up the top end where we've sewn our Velcro. Going to reverse at the start and finish of my stitch line and sew down the length. Okay, now I've stitched my 1 centimeter allowance. I can flip these out. We'll notice then that the back of the Velcro is all nicely enclosed. I'm going to give this a nice press, and I'm going to do just an edge stitch to hold that pocket really nicely in place. The easiest way to get our Velcro to match up is to place our pocket piece that now has the lining with the Velcro sewn in onto the front of our main piece, lining up the sides, as that is how it will be sewn on. Then we're going to pull it back here, and I'm going to mark that top width where my Velcro comes to, so that I know that that is where to place my Velcro piece so that they match up. Perfect. Let's sew this on the same way that we sewed that one on to the lining. To insert our zipper, we're going to need the zipper foot that comes with your sewing machine, and we're also going to need our little clips that came with the kit. We will need the zipper that came with the kit, and we will need to now position it right. This is done in a really simple way. We're going to, for our kits, have it opening from the left, across to the right, closing again at the left, and we're also going to have our wrist strap over to that side. You can absolutely choose if you would like it done in a different way. This will be the front piece because my pocket will be going on top here, so it is entirely up to you. You'll be seeing me sewing it this direction. The first step is to undo your zipper a little more than halfway and place it face down onto the front, which is where we've got our Velcro already sewn on, the front quilted piece of your project. You'll also need the lining piece, and with the correct side, you're going to face that down as well. So you'll have your right sides together and you'll be sandwiching the zip face down. We're sewing with a 1 centimeter allowance for our side seams, so I want to make sure that these claw parts of my zipper are in from that centimeter. So I'm measuring a centimeter and I'm placing it just inside from that, so that when I'm stitching up and past it, I'm not actually stitching that metal clasp into my seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to go to our machine, switch to our zipper foot, and we're going to stitch along this part of our zip to enclose the first edge. At my machine, it doesn't take much for me to lift a little lever, my original foot pops off, and I'm choosing to stitch with my needle on this left-hand side. So I'm going to clip that down because I want to protect where I'm sewing, not so too close to the teeth. Your machine might be different. You will just be able to follow the manual or an online video that came with your machine. Once you've switched out to the zipper foot, we're going to be able to start sewing our zipper in. Remember, we've positioned it at least just past that centimeter in because we will be stitching our seam allowance. Lower it in and honestly sew as you normally would. We're going to start with our back stitch to hold our stitch in place. You'll notice that your zipper foot just navigates to this side, to the right side of your zipper teeth. You can feel the bump of your teeth under here, and the zipper foot is keeping it this side. It's kind of like its own little stop. You don't want to go too close to the teeth or you'll struggle getting your zipper open and closed. This is just a nice, simple way to insert a zip into this project. All right, we want to stitch down to about this pin, about this halfway mark, and then we need to stop because we will want to navigate zipping it closed a little bit up past where we're sewing so that we get a nice clean run and nothing bobbly that's going to get in our way with our zipper foot. Let's sew. I'm going to lift that and zip my project closed. Yeah, it took a little bit of maneuvering, but now my zip is closed up to that point. Just sort of navigate it and zhuzh it past. I left my needle in so that this didn't swish around and had just lifted the presser foot, and this isn't going anywhere because the needle is holding it into place. Lower your presser foot and then you can continue to stitch all the way to the end. Okay, we've successfully inserted one side of the zipper with our lining. Nice and simply, we're now going to do the same for the other side. Okay, we're going to pin it on in a really similar way. So I've got my bows upright, so if you do have a one-way print, double check those, because essentially we want to make sure that when we're finished, our Kindle cover has the bows the right way up. Okay, so knowing that I need them to face like that, I'm going to flip it and make sure that that part is face down onto my zip. I'm lining it up, making sure it's lining up with where the other one is, positioning it in exactly the same way. So remember, we're pinning it just inside of that 1 centimeter. And I also need to make sure that I'm sandwiching my lining as well. So I've got my lining face down on the back of the zip and the zip face up onto the pretty side of my main lining. I'm going to use the same trick where I unzip that down, and I'm going to make sure that my positioning is correct there and that I am also sandwiching it so that my edges and my zip line up. I'm going to put my clips across and head over to my machine. Okay, I have all of my pieces clipped down along that edge. The zip is sandwiched with the right sides together of my lining that I haven't sewn and my main that I haven't sewn. Sandwiching the zip, we're going to do exactly the same as we did for the other side. So I'm sewing to here. Leaving my needle in, lifting my zipper foot and doing my best to maneuver the zip, and it's now down at that other end. I've just maneuvered it past, and with my needle down into my fabric, it's not going anywhere. Lower your presser foot and stitch to the bottom, reverse. Okay, let's flip this and see how we've done. This is looking great. We now want to give these a press, so we're going to press them with our iron nicely at the top, just holding them in really well, making sure that we've got enough space for that beautiful zip to open and close. Make sure that on our underside we can really zhuzh our fabric, give it a nice little press. Okay, this is looking amazing. I've switched my zipper foot out for my main foot. My machine, actually my needle can shift to the left or right. So for me, that makes it really nice and easy to get a beautiful top stitch. If yours doesn't, you might opt to leave the zipper foot so that you can get a really nice close stitch here and not hit into your zipper. So it's entirely up to you. I've switched mine out. Just go with your machine and what feels right. We're wanting to make sure, because we've pressed it well, that we're not going to be sewing and getting this underneath all caught up. So you do want to make sure that you've got all of that like pulled nicely out to the left, and even double checking, really like tug and pull it out before you stitch so that it's all nicely done. Do a reverse stitch, then I'm going to stitch all the way to the bottom and the same on the other side. There is a beautiful top stitch. Let's do the same on the other side. We've now beautifully top stitched and it's caught it really nicely underneath as well. That's a beautiful finish. We're now ready to get the next part going, where we will need our pocket, our wristlet, and our little tab. Let's go. Okay, so I find that the best place for our little tab is 3 centimeters from that top beautifully sewn in edge. So I've marked at the 3 centimeter mark here, and that is going to be where I fold my little tab in half. I like to keep the stitched part facing down. We want to keep our raw edges to our raw edges so it gets nicely caught into the seam. and we're going to place it just underneath that marked point. Then I'm going to just pop that there to hold it in place. We are also going to place our pocket onto the front here, and I'm trying my best to match it up really well, and it should match up because your edges will match together, as will the bottom will match together and your other side, and it should all enclose beautifully with nice even quilting lines. Once you've got everything beautifully matched, you're going to bring just the outer up and over the top, gathering just your pocket and this outer quilted piece here, and we are going to move our lining pieces to also match. Now remember, I've got my little guy pegged here, and I moved that lining out of the way, but I've kept my little tab in place there. So this is the magical bit where we are going to line up our edges. Make sure that's beautifully lined up there. Pop a little clip. Make sure that where my zipper is beautifully lined up. Also going to enclose this. Okay, we're going to keep working our way around to do the same, making sure our lining lines up beautifully. And in our lining, it is really important to leave a gap. You need a pretty decent gap because you have a lot of bulk to pull through. This is a lot of bulk and we need it to all get pulled through at the end. So don't be shy with the gap that you leave here. I'm sewing about an inch or just over an inch of pivoting, and I'm leaving a really good gap in the middle. This is where the magic happens. We have our lining pieces with right sides together, pulled really nicely. Everything is matched up at the ends. The zip is nicely aligned, and we have left a 10 centimeter or 4-inch gap down the bottom because we'll need to pull a lot of bulk through. And on our main side, we have our main pieces with our pocket sandwiched in there, and we had velcroed that on so we know it's in the right spot. It all lines up beautifully, and we have our gorgeous little tab pegged in there as well. So we are going to start from one side of the gap, reverse stitch. We're using a 1 centimeter allowance, and we are going to stitch around the entire way, enclosing all of that all the way back down, pivoting and finishing at the other side of that gap. When you get to the zip, you need to use your hand wheel. Be very mindful that you're going through a lot of bulk, and it's that sort of zip bulk. It's not just lightweight fabric. So using your hand wheel means you won't snap needles at this point. Definitely stick to your 1 centimeter allowance because that's what we allowed on the side where our zip pull is. Make sure your zipper is halfway open and let's sew. Position at your 1 centimeter allowance. Make sure if you've changed any of your stitch settings, you're on a straight stitch and your needle position is back in the center. And start with your reverse as always to hold your stitch in place, especially seeing as this is where you'll pull some bulk through. So definitely go back and forwards a little bit And then we are going to come to the first corner, pivot, stitch all the way around, pivoting and finishing on the other side of that 10 centimeter gap. It's quite hard to sew and maneuver through bulk, so just make sure that you're stopping, realigning things as you go and really holding it. So you don't need to push and pull and you don't want to smush it around, but really holding it into place as you go through these bulkier parts with the pocket and everything. Coming up to the other side of the zipper, we're going to use our hand wheel again. Remember to keep that 1 centimeter allowance. You'll find it quite tough to guide that hand wheel through, but then easier once you're out the other side. Trim those corners down as well. This is the time where you can trim the zip ends to get rid of any bulk that we've stitched in. They're now held really nicely. And let's turn it through. I'm actually going to use a point turner, or I've just got like a wooden knitting needle, putting it into these corners to turn them through really nicely. They are bulky, but they also give like a nice rounded look to the quilted cover. Okay, do that for each of the corners. Okay, this is almost complete. You can see that our beautiful little tab is sewn in. You can see that we zip up beautifully at the top there. It's why we allowed that bit of space. We can see those beautiful zipper teeth, letting it stop. We've got our lining. It's beautifully in there. It needs a nice little press as well. And we're almost complete. We've got 2 things to go. Stitch this opening closed, and then we will be putting on our gorgeous little wristlet, and it's nearly complete. Got this all threaded up and ready, and a knot in one end, and give this a nice little press, just pressing in that seam so that it stays there really nicely for us to sew. So I'm going to insert my needle in so that it's nice and hidden, so that it hides my little knot. So see how that little knot is now inside it. Then I'm going to stitch about 1 centimeter increments along that fold. I'm going to pull that needle up and through, pull the thread, and then directly across from that, I will put my next stitch and go the same amount. Pull the thread through. Next stitch directly across, and the same amount. When you get to the last part here, we want to just give it a little bit of a knot around itself to hold it really well. I'm going to go through and just tighten and do another little knot. Oops, through and tighten. 3, one more for good measure, huh? And tighten it up. Okay, snip, and that is beautifully finished. Can't even see. I am just loving this. I love that that lines up beautifully, that was top stitched and finished. Beautiful top stitching, very simple zip. There's so many ways to insert zips for this project. That was the way. And our little OMG moment. Attached. And this is the best. This comes with all the hardware, the zip, the coordinating or contrasting thread, which you'll see in the listing when you go through to choose your fabric. I am so excited.